Hey friends, Tashin here. Having a little bit of a tough body day. I feel a little sore and tight in my body. But here we are, and there's something I want to talk about, which is conflict and the art of repair from Dr. Hazel-Grace Yates. I took this awesome course from Dr. Hazel-Grace Yates, I think earlier this year, maybe at the end of last year, called The Art of Repair. And it's a self-paced course that is about how to repair relationships of any kind after rupture, after conflict. And I've been thinking about it in these terms, which is, I love biomotive from Dr. Doug Tatarin and his family. That was so helpful to me to learn biomotive really deeply and to practice it very intensely, because I couldn't cry for a long time. I had a really difficult time crying, and I didn't know what my emotions were. From Doug's perspective, I was alexithymic, where I didn't have words for emotions, and that made it difficult to process emotions and made it difficult to cry. Even though I wanted to cry, I genuinely wanted to cry, I just couldn't. And I relearned how to cry and how to name my emotions and how to talk about my emotions and how to resolve them. And I do biomotive all the time. Love it. Tried and true. I have a really good post about it. But the thing is, crying, releasing emotions is actually incredibly natural. It's the natural state in some ways. And for whatever reason, culturally, physiologically, mimetically even, we get blocked. I got blocked. Many people get blocked. I think especially men get blocked on this, but it's helpful for a lot of people. And alexithymia is endemic in our culture and at this time. And that's a tragedy, because it means that people are disconnected from their emotions. It means they can't resolve their emotions very smoothly. And it also, there's really important information in our emotions that we don't know how to name, that we can't really easily share with other people. And that creates widespread disconnection where, you need to tell someone, hey, I felt dropped or abandoned by you or betrayed by you or whatever. And you don't have the words for that. So they can't know that you feel that way. Unless they are really emotionally intelligent. So there's just widespread disconnection and second order effects from that and so on. And biomotive is a way to relearn a very natural process where there's this kind of multi-step process for doing something that really ought to be very natural and very intuitive and very common, that has become uncommon and difficult and unnatural, hard to do. And so we have to build this sort of elaborate system. Like the Nadera process is 7 letters? And it's like, you go through these steps: notice, experience, differentiate, express, resonate, resolve, take action or update, whatever. I think those are the steps. And I've kind of internalized them pretty deeply, so I don't even remember that full acronym, but that's the idea. And I had to relearn how to do this thing that ought to be really natural. It's like we come out of the womb knowing how to ride a bike, and then we forget, and so we have to relearn. Of course, that's not literally true with the bike, but it's like as if that were the case. Or as if we came out of the womb knowing how to walk, which some animals do, and then we forget, and then we have to relearn how to walk. But the process of relearning this thing is kind of artificial and kind of fabricated. It's this made up framework to help people intellectually understand something that's very physiological, very intuitive, very embodied. And that's just what we need if something has become kind of unnatural. So to me, the art of repair is kind of isomorphic to that, or has the same shape, where in some ways how to repair a relationship after there's been conflict or rupture kind of ought to be pretty natural, especially, if you imagine, maybe this is a false example or sort of a strange line of thinking, but I'm imagining like a small tribe. If you lived in a small tribe of 20, 30, 50, 100, 150 people, you'd have conflicts, but then you'd kind of know, we're going to get through this because there's just the tribe, and we'll figure out how to repair. And there'd be a kind of safety in that. I'm pissed off at this person right now. They're being dumb, but we'll get through it, and it's going to be okay. And I have been incredibly conflict avoidant for a lot of my life. I've been afraid of anger. other people's anger. I also realized my own anger. And there's a lot of different things that I've done to work with that I could talk about. But learning the repair process from Dr. Hazel-Grace Yates has been such a gift. And when I heard her explain it, and when I heard my friend Rosemary explain it to me, who I learned about it from, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious and so brilliant. And like, this is exactly like biomotive, where it's this sort of fabricated artificial process that helps us relearn something that ought to be really natural but isn't. And so I'm really grateful to it. And it has been that. It's been so invaluable. And I've intentionally had repair conversations, and those went much better for having had conflict than if I hadn't had that system. Sometimes people have brought their conflicts to me, and they're like, hey, I'm upset about this. Happened a few weeks ago. A friend called me on the phone. We had a phone date, and I thought we were just going to catch up. And they were like, hey, actually, I need to talk to you about this thing that happened 13, 14, 15 years ago that you did that really hurt me. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, we're shifting gears here. This is not just a casual small talk, catch-up conversation. There's something really important here. And I was like, well, thankfully, I know about the repair process. And so it wasn't perfect. It wasn't exactly like the repair process, but I could use those skills and make use of them and lean on them. And I think that conversation, not only did it go well, I think it went better than they thought it would be. And I didn't even know we were going to have a conversation like that, but I was prepared because I'd learned the repair process. So practicing it has been really useful. Just today, I asked someone I had conflict with like a year and a half ago to have a repair conversation about it. And they were like, yeah, this sounds great. Let's do that. I don't know how that's going to go, but it's so nice to be like, I know how to do this and have this skill in my repertoire. So anyway, repair is an acronym in the repair process. It's REPAIR. And Dr. Hazel-Grace Yates has this amazing image on their website that you can see. It's worth looking that up and seeing the image and sort of internalize it. I would suggest memorizing it. It's only 6 letters. It's worth memorizing. And if you really like it, if you really resonate with it, the course and their materials about it are incredible and so helpful. Like I loved the course. It was so helpful and really helped me internalize this on a deeper level beyond just knowing the acronym or knowing the steps. There's a lot of subtlety to how to apply it that the course really helped me with. And then just practicing it. That's a big part of the course, is setting you up to practice different aspects of it. So the repair process actually has 2 steps. There's the preparation stage, which is REP, the first half of the acronym. And then there's sort of actually having the conflict, which I forget what they call it, but it's the repair conversation that's live. So the very first step is to resource oneself. If we've had a hurt, if we've had a rupture, often we get emotionally activated. Our nervous system is not regulated. And so the first step is just to regulate. You can't have a good conversation until you yourself are grounded and regulated. And there's a bunch of different ways you can regulate your body. I've practiced a bunch of them in my 20s. So I kind of skipped over that part of the course because I was like, okay, just do the thing. But the course has a bunch of things of how to regulate your nervous system, deep breathing, slow breathing, yoga, or like going for a walk or talking to a friend or journaling. Like all of these things are regulating and help regulate your nervous system. And you just lean on the ones that feel useful until you're pretty grounded and resourced. And then E is empathizing. And the very first thing you do is you just validate your own experience. And this was so valuable to me to learn how to watch Dr. Hazel-Grace Yates do this in the demonstration. In every step of the course, there's these really lovely demonstrations where they show what that part of the process looks like, where they're not just describing it or giving you exercise, but you really get to see what it looks like. And it was amazing to watch them basically validate themselves. And I validate my friends all the time. And I was like, oh, I could do this for myself. Amazing, mind-blowing. Like, it's kind of obvious now that you say it, but to watch Dr. Hazel-Grace Yates do it, watch them to go through that process, very powerful. I was so impressed with them and with their partner who's in the videos. Really impressed with them. The more of those videos I watched, I was like, wow, they're amazing. They have learned so much and such a gift that they made this process. But yeah, you empathize with yourself and you're like, I don't know, so for me, that looks like telling myself a story of like, yeah, this thing happened and it happened like this, and this was my experience, and I'm so angry at the person, I'm confused, and I wish this hadn't happened, and whatever. and really validating that. Be like, yeah, it really was like that for me. Like, I don't know what it was like for them. I don't know how they're feeling. I don't know what their experience is like, but damn, that was rough. And just validating it. And sometimes it's helpful to journal about it. It can be helpful to talk to a friend. But the point is to take time to empathize with your own experience of what happened. And then, importantly, the second half of empathize is you do the same for them. And you really imagine what it might have been like to be them. And I would say this is drawing on theory of mind, which I could do a whole separate video or a lot of videos about. Loopy and I have a blog post about theory of mind, about what that is. But like, knowing that everyone has their own experience and that they're having a different experience than we are, and trying to imagine either conceptually or in a heart way or in a bodied way. There's a bunch of ways to access this, but like, what might it be like to be this person? And reckoning with that. Like, I know they're having a tough day and they just come from this difficult conversation, and I know they're really caring about this thing, and they said this thing, and it might have been like this for them. And maybe there's things going on that I don't even know about. And probably they were feeling angry and caring about why, when I said this, that was kind of hurtful, and probably that hurt their feelings. And just really empathizing with what it was like to be them to the best of your ability. You're not them, you can't know for sure, but you just try. You try to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what that would be like, connect to what that might be like. And going through that process is so helpful and can already be healing of like, yeah, that didn't go well, but I could see why they'd feel that way. I could see why they'd act that way. That can already be healing. Then P is asking for permission. You ask for permission. Hey, can we have this repair conversation? And there's a very specific way that they recommend asking for permission, where you kind of set both of you up for success of like, how activated I am. Like, I'm really upset about this, and I just need you to know I'm very upset about it. They recommend using a scale from 1 to 10. I didn't like that. I don't like putting numbers to my emotions, so I just don't do that. I'm like, hey, I'm really activated about this. This really matters to me, just so you know. Or, you know, I'm not really feeling charged about this right now, or I'm feeling a moderate level of charge. I'm kind of activated about this. It's helpful to disclose that how activated you are, not getting into specifics, but like, yeah, this might be an intense conversation. You say how long you think it's going to be. You kind of name what you want to do, and like, hey, I'm trying to have a conflict, a conversation about that conflict we had. And importantly, you name it so that it's in service of something. It's like, why do it? You make a bid for why this would be worth doing. Like, I really value our friendship, and if we don't talk about this, then it's going to be really hard for our friendship. So I value our friendship. Can we have this conversation? And that's how you ask for permission. And importantly, they might say no. They might be like, no, I'm not ready for that, or I don't want to do that. And if that's the case, then you thank them. Be like, thank you. Because if they're not ready, if they're not willing, you're not going to have a good conversation. It's not going to go well. And they know that. So you thank them and you're like, thank you for knowing yourself, and great. Talk to me again if you feel differently. Or maybe they make a counter proposal like, hey, I don't know if I can talk for a full hour about this, but could we try 20 minutes? Or I'm not ready to meet in person. Could we do it over the phone? Or whatever it is, maybe they have a counter proposal, and you can see how you feel about that. But it's important basically that both people consent to having this kind of a conversation, because not only is it respectful and kind, but it's really just practically, strategically not going to go well if they're not actually on board with it. If you don't have a shared interest in repairing. And I've had that happen. There's a conflict I had last year that the person was just not interested in repairing. And it was like, all right, well, there we are. I can't make them interested in it. And I realized through that actually that a prerequisite for me for friendship is a willingness to repair, to even have that conversation. And it's fine that they're not, but it's like, okay, then I'm just not going to be able to be friends with you at this time. And that's okay. That's how I'm going to respect myself here. So that kind of sucked, but you know, they're not going to have a conversation they're not ready for. So that's all the preparation: resourcing, empathizing, permission. And then there's 3 more steps, which are for actually having the discussion when you both are ready for it and you're both consenting to it. And the very first step is getting to shared reality. I forget what the A stands for actually, but it's about shared reality of like getting the facts is how I would describe it, of like, what happened? What even happened? Okay, we were at the movies, and then you said this thing, and then I left. It's like only factual. There's no emotions. It's just like getting to shared reality of what happened. You know, I sent you an email asking you to pay, and then you didn't pay. And we can just both agree, yep, you sent that email and I didn't pay. Great. Sometimes they talk in the course about complex shared reality, which is a subtle subcase of this, where it's like, this was your reality and I understand that, and this was my reality and you understand that. And sometimes it's not possible to agree on the facts as to what happened, but it is possible to get to a kind of shared reality where you agree, oh, this is what happened for you and what it was like for you, and this is what happened for me and what it was like for me. And that's harder, that's more complex, but it is possible, and they talk in the course about how to do that. The other case is simple shared reality, where you just agree, yeah, we went to the movies and then we had an argument and I left. That's simple, that's straightforward. And that's the ideal case, but there is ways to navigate complex shared reality if that's the thing. And they talk about that in the course, how to do that. But ideally you get to shared reality, just the facts. What can we agree happened? And you don't proceed until you get to shared reality. Yep, I sent this message, you sent that message, then we didn't talk for a month, those are the facts. And you can, when you agree with the facts, that's already healing, because like, okay, we have shared reality now. Then you talk about impact, and actually both people are impacted. It may seem like one person's the villain and one person's the victim. It may seem like you're the victim and the other person is the villain. They may see you as the villain and you as the victim. That's all the drama triangle. I try to live outside of the drama triangle, not buy into the frame that I'm a villain or a victim or a hero. Easier said than done. But anyway, when there's conflict, both people had an experience, and you take time in this step to name what the impact on you was. Hey, when you left from the movies, I felt abandoned and betrayed and confused and like distrusting of whether we even had a friendship, and I felt hurt and sad and I cried, and then I wanted to call you the next day, but I didn't call you because I felt like you wouldn't pick up, and it made me feel really far away from you. And the other person's like, wow, oh, I can see how that would be like that. And then they share their experiences like, well, I left the movies because the thing you said was so insensitive and so rude, and I felt really hurt and like disrespected, and it made me not want to spend time with you. And yeah, if you had called me the next day, I would have been like, hell no, I'm not ready for that. And it made me really angry and whatever. I'm just making this story up. Not a real story, not based in reality. But both people have an experience, and you take time to share your experience and be heard in that, and also to hear the other person's experience, to witness them, to validate them. And that's also healing, of like, wow, of course these facts would have this impact on you. And to see each other's perspective, right? That's when you're having conflict, you're only seeing from your perspective and you're not seeing from the other person's perspective. You are regulated in a nervous system way, dysregulated, and only once you've resourced and are talking to the other person can you kind of hear their perspective and take it in. And conflict is healed when both people can see from both people's perspective and kind of find a new way forward. And that comes to the last step, which is to restore integrity. And in the course, they talk about 5 different ways to do it. They give some suggestions. And I think it's pretty natural, actually, at that point. If you've gone through the previous 5 steps, you'll be like, oh, let's do this. I apologize. I make an apology. Or recently, I made a donation to a nonprofit for this thing that happened a while ago. I was like, oh, that feels like the thing to do. And the other person was like, yeah, that would feel really nice. And I don't know, you can decide together, what are we going to do now that we've seen each other's reality and seen the impact? Like, let's make a decision about what we want to do moving forward to repair the relationship. And that often arises really naturally in my experience. It's helpful to have those 5 options, but and kind of know that they're there. But if you have arrived at a shared perspective of what happened, then it happens naturally. Like, oh, let's do this thing. So that's the repair process. I have found it so valuable. It's kind of involved. It's like REPAR and like go through these steps, but with practice, they get really familiar, and it only has to take 10 minutes sometimes, or sometimes it's an hour, or sometimes it takes multiple passes of conversations. Like you can only get so much of it, or there's aspects actually that come up later and it's like, oh, I thought we were resolved on this, but actually it wasn't. I had that happen with one of my first repair conversations during this course was a conflict I'd had like 4 years before. And the other person experienced it as resolved, but I realized I didn't feel resolved. And so I asked for a repair conversation for about 20 minutes to explain what my perspective was like. And I even made a request at the end, like, could we do this? And that went really well. They were open to it. They were a little surprised because it had been a while, but we saw each other's perspective, and it helped me to repair that relationship and to feel more connected. I had been kind of distancing myself from that relationship because of that conflict that had happened, I guess, 3 years prior. So, yeah, this has been just such a blessing because conflicts happen all the time. And in fact, I've come to see, this is what they say in the image is like good relationships have conflicts. You can't be in relationship without eventually having some kind of conflict or misunderstanding or like values discrepancy, or so you bump into stuff. You just do bump into stuff descriptively. And so this gives me a process for how to work with that. And I'm sure there's edge cases where it doesn't work perfectly. I think that's one of the things that the non-naive trust dance talks about is like, just using NVC is not perfect, or just using any one system is not going to be perfect. Kind of like Gödel's incompleteness theorem, but for conflict resolution. But this has been such a valuable framework for me to have. It's a really good baseline for if there's been rupture, this is how we repair. If there's been conflict, go through this process, try your best. It may not be perfect, it may not be possible, but like it's a pretty tried and true recipe for healing what's been hurt. I'll just say something else, which is my own working model for conflict repair before this was kind of both really impoverished compared to the repair process, and I think still worth saying, which is sort of twofold of like, if there's conflict, try to have a verbal conversation about it, ideally in person, failing that on Zoom, failing that on the phone, but have a synchronous conversation about it. Much easier to resolve conflict in a synchronous conversation rather than in a text-based way. And then if you can't resolve conflict one-on-one, to pull in a trusted third party that both people trust, love, respect, feel trusted, loved, and respected by, and ask them to mediate a conversation. Because if you keep snagging on conflict between two people, it means that there's a shared blind spot or like a feedback loop such that you are hitting each other's blind spots and you can't resolve it from within the system. So you need someone outside the system to reflect what's obvious to them but not to you from within the system. And so ideally you can come to repair within a two-person system, but if failing that, you can bring in a trusted third party, and has to be someone that both people consent to. Like, I feel trusted by this person, I feel trust for this person, I respect them, I feel respected by them, I feel loved by them. And that person has to be able to stand in that, the ability to love and trust both people. I love doing this for my friends. I've done this for couples. I've had a couple of Twitter mutuals that are couples like ask me to do this for them, who've even been on record of saying, yeah, we had Tashin do that. And I love doing this for people, but when I'm the one in conflict, I can't do that for the other person. And so it's helpful to know, like, hey, who's someone that we both trust and love and respect that we could ask to mediate this conversation for us. And it's almost always incredibly obvious to the third person, like, oh, like you keep interrupting the other person, or you're using this specific tone of voice, or you're being rude and insulting that in a way that actually wasn't obvious to the system from within the system, wasn't obvious to the dyad within the dyad. And they just name it, and you're like, whoa, like once that information is witnessed by the system in a way that both people can receive, then it just dissolves. Like, oh, I had no idea. Like, for example, when I do that for people, I'm saying, like, they're both saying, I love you, but in totally different ways, and they can't hear it for each other. And it's like, I can translate, hey, this person is saying, I love you. Did you know that? And they're like, oh, I had no idea. And I'm like, did you know this person is saying, I love you? Oh, I had no idea, because they're expressing it in different ways. And I love doing that. But I think that's worth mentioning to round out the art of repair of, like, if you really can't do it with the two people, but there's mutual interest in buy-in and repairing, then having a third person come in can be really helpful. I found that just like such a helpful playbook for conflict. So I still feel like I'm learning so much about this. I'm still learning so much about how to have conflict, but I have loved the art of repair, and I can't recommend Dr. Hazel-Grace's Yates' course enough. They are amazing. I would love to have them on my podcast at some point. I think they are not ready for that, or not at a good place for that, but would love to have a conversation with them one day, and have so much admiration and respect for what they're doing. And can't recommend the course highly enough. I know that they have some more advanced stuff too, which I haven't done, but the self-paced course is terrific. Amazing course. There are self-paced courses that are awful. There are ones that are like good and okay, and then there are ones that change your life, and that's definitely one that changed my life. So if you have trouble with conflict, or you're having an interpersonal conflict, I'd really recommend it. One thing they say that's good advice in the course is like, don't jump right into the hardest conflict that you have. It's even useful to like practice with fake conflicts first, and just practice the skills, practice the motions, and build up to the hardest conflicts. That's really helpful. That's been helpful because maybe you have a backlog of conflicts that are unresolved. I know I did that's one of the exercises, like, oh, where am I having conflict that's not resolved? And you build up to the harder ones over time, and you build the muscles first before doing you lift easy weights before you lift heavy weights. So anyway, I love The Art of Repair. And if you have done it yourself, I'd love to hear about your experience of it. If you take the course, I'd love to hear about it. If you have your own ideas about conflict and how to resolve conflict that I haven't mentioned at all, I'd love to hear them. Feel free to share those in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm sending you love.